I'm Italian and I live in Milan. And in my school, I often hear those jokes between boys that kind of go like this. You know what? Women are weak. Their only work should be washing the dishes and making us sandwiches. Funny, right? Well, not so much. Women have fought long and hard to reach self-determination and equal rights. So those boys should study our country's history a little better, because in fact, the world wars were the final turning point to their struggle. Women are the big force in the modern world, and whoever doesn't see that doesn't understand how the modern world works, Giorgia said. Italian women outdid themselves during the war, and they finally showed how great their heart is and how courageous they can be. Before the war, though, men were considered the stronger sex. They represented the perfect combo between brains and strengths by the strict society. On the other hand, women were considered the weaker sex. They were often relegated to the household or to small wage jobs, such as teaching, bookkeeping, selling in stores, servantry, and working in agriculture. And during the early 30s and 40s, the fascist ideology dictated procreation as a woman's duty as well. Voting was also denied to women until after the war, when in 1945 they finally gained full suffrage. But as I said earlier, the world wars changed women's roles in society forever. With the mobilization of multiple armies from many countries all around the world, Italy, amongst others, male workers had to abandon their jobs in the textile and coal industry and their duties on the agricultural fields. So along with other necessities, such as maintaining a quick production of weapons, a rapid refueling of resources and foods for the soldiers abroad, and many, many more, women were called to help keep the commercial profit stable for their countries. In the rough years of war, women not only took over jobs such as riding buses and fixing cables and sewers that were previously considered male occupations, but they also helped in the military compartment. They weren't called on the front lines, but they helped with communication and healthcare services, such as the Red Cross nurses movement, which was crucial for Italy's population survival. Women also played a very important part in what was the partisan resistance. Warlays, in fact, acted as couriers, spies, fighting the civil war against the Nazis in 1943. Among the most courageous ones, we can remember Giorgia, whom I've mentioned before, who became the first female president of the Chamber of Deputies and remained in charge for 13 years. Gisella Fioranini, who was the second representative of the Communist Party and joined the Italian-Swiss resistance, and Carla Capponi, former duty of the Communist Party, who received the Medal of Honor for fighting against the fascists in 1945. Their duty was to fulfill the soldiers' needs by bringing them weapons, resources, and sometimes even telegrams by foot or bike along the rocky mountains and valleys of the Italian Alps. My grandma was a 5-year-old kid when World War II started. And even though she was so young, she still remembers every single detail of it. Women remained completely alone after their husbands and sons were called on the front lines, she remembers. And until then, when they were children, women weren't allowed to go to school. And the very lucky ones managed to finish primary school. Then they remained at home. They learned how to be good housekeepers until their early 20s, when they got married, and were still considered inferior to men, less suited to a complete education or craftsmanship. Many families, just like my nana's, were evacuated from their residences. They were forced to travel through regions to search for a place for their children to grow up that was safe. And that made the economical situation even harder for women after men left. And my grandma also remembers that many women, called the ausiliarie, directly cooked, washed the uniforms, stewed clothes, and medically assisted the soldiers on the front lines. Some of them actually wanted to fight on the battlefield, but that for them remained a pointless dream. So women saw the war as not only an opportunity to serve their countries, but also to improve their rights, their independence, and finally get the recognition they deserved. They were ready to sacrifice their life for their families and strangers as well, victims of bombings, anti-fascist, Jewish people, and soldiers, and many, many, many more. But once the war was over, they weren't welcomed home with shining parades or proud thank yous, and they weren't even recognized enough for their unquantifiable effort and resilience. Instead, it took time for society to recognize all they had done and to improve their rights. Women didn't give up, though. They tucked their sleeves and started tracing a path for themselves, a path towards women emancipation. After gaining the right to vote in 1945, from 1963, women could become part of a political party, and in 1970s, they scored major achievements regarding the new introduction of laws, regulating divorce, abortion in 1978, and the introduction of a new family code in 1975. From the 20th October 1999, women are now allowed to be part of the Marines, aviation trainees, and the military. Currently, 7% of the global army is made up of women. I know what you're thinking, and I know it probably doesn't sound like a lot. But just imagine that in 23 years, women turned their destinies upside down, and in the 50 years before, they had taken over a whole lot new of responsibilities. Sounds like a big deal of success to me. World War II was a milestone for women emancipation. We have become powerful fighters, and we have learned to shatter our own barriers of enemies. It doesn't matter how hard it was or how hard it's gonna be. We just have to keep raising the bar higher. Now we are witnessing a resurfacing of the wars, and the Italian government is planning on investing 2% of the national GDP in the military. And even if under unfortunate circumstances, I genuinely hope to see a massive representation of women fighting on the front lines alongside men. Thank you.